What is going on, everyone? I got Nicholas Thorne here. After some massive issues on the technological side of this, believe it or not, my IT degree did not do anything to help me here. We are back. We are talking about these recent UFL cuts. We're going to be doing my week one prediction. We're not going to do too much roster breakdown because I feel like we've done way more than anyone even cares at this point. But we are going to talk a little bit about the roster, specifically a guy like, probably like DC with Abram Smith. Looking at doing about an hour and some change. Appreciate you guys dropping in. Once again, very sorry about the live stream. I know we have a great time doing it. We get a lot of good feedback, but it's not the reality we live in today, unfortunately. Nick, how you doing today, bro?
Doing great, excited to give some final thoughts on these rosters and start talking about actual games, which will be played this week, which is kind of crazy to think about. It felt like this day would never come this off season, but we're here.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny to think we'd be in week 6 of XFL season and then 2 weeks away from the USFL season last year. Instead, we're in, week 3 or something like that of the IFL, getting psyched up about that, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it hurts to, lose 8 teams and, there's a lot less football being played this year than last year, but the quality is going to be higher and, we'll get into it when we talk about these rosters a little bit, but, there's a lot of interesting things to look forward to, even if, 16 teams aren't a reality anymore.
Yeah. Well, first thing we're going to do, we're going to talk about these releases and everything like that. Going through Arlington, who you got on Arlington that really surprised you, man?
Yeah, there's a few names. Arlington wasn't that interesting of a team to me going into camp, but some guys kind of exceeded expectations with Day Hunter at running back, beating out guys like Devin Darrington and Morgan Ellison. Juwan Manigo or Mango, I don't know exactly how to say his last name, but he was, a Mexican Football League player and was able to make the final roster. So as you can see here, this is my roster doc. The depth chart is, TBD. This is more approximations than confirmed, but there's a few guys that, those are 2 that I think no one really gave a chance going into camp that actually beat out some pretty good players to, make a final roster.
Yeah, I mean, to me, when I look at their roster, when I look at their cut list, the biggest one that I see is Christian Sam, because of his deal of walking off during the walkthrough, allegedly, per Holton Ahlers, who's the unofficial PR rep for that team right now. And also Marquise Lucas, guy's been around a while. I think he's another guy like we saw with Manny Bunch and whatnot that's going to retire. Pretty pumped about that offensive line, the tight end group. I think with Winstead, that's going to be kind of the guy at that wide receiver group. But don't be surprised if Caleb Van Der Esch finishes the season 40-plus tackles. Overall, defense looks kind of similar, pretty solid up front. Going to be very curious to see if a guy like Colin Schooler, who, kind of fits the mode of that special teams ace, how he's going to do. Delonte Hood, NAIA guy, what his deal is. And then specialist, I mean, a little bit older, but pretty solid. And then that team only gets better, in my opinion, if they get Garrett McGinn back, who I was told had a torn meniscus, and then Cameron Brown. So I think pretty straightforward on them, man. Like you said, nothing too crazy. I do like Austin Allen. A lot of people got real giddy with him when he went to the Giants because Daniel Bellinger was hurt, and he got a lot more reps and everything like that. But as far as cuts, really nothing too oh my God, what was this nonsense type thing? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, it was sad to see a guy like Noah Taylor go, is another name to mention, just because he's, a younger guy, got beat out by some veteran edge rushers. But all in all, I think they're pretty set. It'll be interesting to see how the secondary shakes out with a lot of new faces there. But yeah, no, I think it's, of all the teams, this one's one of the more straightforward ones for sure.
Yeah. Now getting a little bit off the beaten path a little bit, you go to DC. two guys that really came off the list was Jazz Ferguson and Tim Ward, which Tim Ward ultimately goes back to the San Antonio Brahmas. What do you think about Tim Ward? And also kind of surprised that Zaquandre Wright gets cut. Because he's amazing to me, but because I think he's extremely solid and he could serve as more of that traditional running back compared to Puka Williams. I think they should have kept Puka because of his versatility and all the issues they've kind of had at receiver with retirements and whatnot and he can play in the special teams game as well. And Puka was pretty underwhelming last year, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be, I think, the big question is running back and receiver with a lot of new faces or guys who were depth pieces having to step up this year.
Yeah,
they've spoke very highly about Cameron Harris and Brandon Smith. We'll see. I mean, it seems like they're going to get the shot first for week one. There's a lot of interesting pieces around there. Kiki Cutie, Ty Scott, Darius Higgins. There's some guys I'm really intrigued to see how it'll all shake out. Kelvin Harmon, I'm really surprised he was able to beat out some of the guys he beat out to make a final roster here. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out for sure. Puka Williams, I think, was kind of a surprise for me. I didn't have him making the roster.
It was the
versatility on a 50-man.
Yeah,
for sure.
You know, you look at. Did you watch my video with Flip yesterday?
I haven't gotten to that yet.
So I asked him that, and I messed up the question a little bit. I phrased it in a wrong way as far as what I said was if you have an A player at one position, I should have said if you had a B player and you have like a B minus and a C plus guy who can play 3 or 4 positions, does that guy get the roster spot when you're looking at like roster spot number 45, 46, 47? I said A player. But he kind of helped me out and phrased it in a better way. And specifically, I talk about a guy like Jordan Thomas, who we'll talk about in the Birmingham Stallions. That's a guy that, to me, he plays like 4 different positions. Plus, he's a core 4 special teams guy. You know, when I saw some like pre-roster people who were like, or preview people who were like, oh, yeah, he's going to get cut. And I'm like, He's not. There's no way. He fills 6 different positions. Like it's 50-man rosters, dude. So that was something that I always kind of kept in the back of my mind. Some surprises that are still on this roster, by the way, for me. DJ Swearinger and Monte Nicholson, and a little bit older. And I think it's kind of cool that like Gary and Conley and DeAndre Baker, some what's the word I'm looking for? Some projects over there.
Yeah, 2 former first-round picks for sure. The one that really sticks out to me as far as like a guy I can't believe made it this far is Dennis Johnson, that 4th defensive lineman for the DC Defenders. He was an XFL Combine participant. So a lot of those guys, you just kind of assumed that through this whole process, we're going to get kind of phased out as the teams went from, 16 to 8. But he was able to hang on. He was only one of, I think, 3 or 4 guys in the entire league that were a part of that XFL Combine that were able to stick around. So those kind of guys are the ones that you kind of like want to keep an eye on. Nadar Rouse is another guy. He was if you remember last year, that was at the NFL Alumni Academy. He was a signed player coming out of that. So the fact that not only was he able to stick around last season, but he's able to stick around in a very deep, secondary where guys like Kentrell Bryce, who were starters last year, didn't make it, is something to keep an eye on also.
Yeah, there were a couple of NFL Alumni Academy. Like when I first saw it, I feel like both sides kind of bit off more than they can chew. Because they had some guys who had no business being in the NFL Alumni Academy, and they were like, oh, I'm going to go do this, and I'm going to get an opportunity with the XFL. And it's like, bro. And then they kind of threw him a bone a little bit, like to all of the players. I think it was like 30 or 40 guys that got on the roster. And like some of them ended up sticking around. The biggest one I could remember is Caleb Vander Esch was an Alumni Academy guy. There's a couple more that I know I'm missing. A couple running backs Jeremy Cox, I think, was one. But there was a couple running
Yeah, I
backs
think
towards
so.
the end of the season. And then, one guy who wasn't a star by any means, and this is probably what I really liked about, having 2 leagues last year, is like you saw Alumni Academy guys get cut from the XFL and then sign USFL contracts within 15 minutes of getting cut. And, that's the great thing when you have 16 teams, but I'm starting to believe that I think the sweet spot for a spring football league right now is 12. I think 12
Yeah, I'd agree
is
with that.
like 12 good teams. That your worst team is a 4-win team. Because then some of the, you look at some of the back end rosters and whatnot, and we've talked about this before. Is like they were signing some guys like in the XFL. I felt like they were signing some guys that had no business being in the league because they were like, why would I go sign if my one guy, why would I sign with you when the USFL is going to give me 10 weeks of paychecks? So some of those guys that were signed towards the end, I was kind of like, oh, okay, through that week 7 to week 10. But you got a couple of gems in there, like Kelly Bryant was one. Like, not that he was a star, but he was extremely valuable to Arlington towards the end. But I'm starting to, get a little sidetracked here, but I'm starting to believe that 12 is the sweet spot where you get enough guys employed to where you also have plenty of people, who deserve to be playing higher level football to continue to make the product extremely sufficient. So these are all these Friday press releases and whatnot. Going to the Houston Roughnecks. Only surprise here, they're going into the season with 3 running backs, with Mark Thompson possibly on the fritz. You would have think they just signed a guy or brought back like a Ryan Nall or something like that just for like 2 weeks and then put him on his way. Biggest release here for me was Manny Bunch. He was an all USFL guy last year. He obviously announced his retirement. So you kind of wonder if he was actually cut versus like he went into CJ's office and was like, hey, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that's pure speculation at that point. I'll say, as far as running back go, if Thompson, remember, there's 50 on a roster, but you have to have only, 42, I think it is, active.
Yeah, it's
so
42 or 43. Yeah.
I think they were going to have 2 running backs up anyway. And I like Evans and Pledger as a 1-2 punch early in the year. So I don't mind that so much. The thing that really intrigues me is the receiver room, where they got, 8 receivers, and Kiki Cheesem, Anthony Ratliff-Williams, and Emmanuel Butler as guys who were returning from last year, which were never. Some of them were fine, but they were role players for them last year in an offense that didn't like to throw the ball. So where are they fitting in? Are those guys really good special teams guys, or are they, are they gunner or whatever?
Chisholm is a good special teams guy. Cyril Grayson is a special teams guy. Henny, obviously, a special teams guy, more in the return game.
Yeah.
Hall too. I mean, I think they opened it up. Guarantano got a little bit of that Wash State with him, Wazoo. It just, to me, it's like what, I think they're going to be in a lot more like 10 personnel, or originally I thought they'd be in a lot. When they had Bahar and this roster was kind of like taking shape, I was like, okay, a lot of 12 personnel, a lot of double tight end sets, like rollouts, stuff like that. Now I'm kind of leaning to a more spread attack, and I'm very curious at their tight end position. Because if you look through their 3 guys, Sig is the most athletic out of those 2, and he has better hands than Bowman and Braden. So I think you see Sig as that, because he's going to play. He's starting fullback for them when they choose to do that, which is why I thought they would keep 4 tight ends possibly, and then move move away from one of the receivers. But I don't really know what their offense is going to look like based off these numbers. I think they're going to be at the more spread offense, 4 wide or 3 wide with a tight end in the slot or something like that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think I kind of agree. They built in the offseason to be this kind of big, 2 tight end, 12 personnel set type offense. And it feels like they've realized that they can't get away with that. And they've kind of adjusted on the fly. The last guy I'll point out on the Roughnecks, Jamari Brown, the name in purple, that means that they're draft eligible for 2024. He's one of 2 players in the league right now, both of which made the final 50-man rosters. So they're 2 guys that, if they play really well, that's something to keep on an eye on, because those are the guys that, you think are the most likely to go back, or not go back, but go to the NFL, maybe even get into the conversation of being a 6th, 7th round pick potentially.
Yeah, I mean, for me, especially like what do 6th, 7th round picks do? They play special teams, really focused on what they're going to be doing as far as like with him, whether it be on the field. But yeah, I definitely agree. Like, he's someone that I've seen kind of pop up here and there. Houston to me is one of the most intriguing teams because and I say identity change, I don't mean by like Gamblers, the Roughnecks. I mean just by personnel and whatnot. So I'm very curious to see what's going on. I know that, like, CJ has talked about using that QB2 in the game a little bit. When he said that to me, I think that this is my mentality, is that you activate Nolan Henderson because he's more athletic. So he gives you that true change of pace. But if Guarantano's ineffective or gets hurt, Reed Sinet's your starter, if that makes sense. Because you could run
for sure. There's
offense.
A few teams like that.
Yeah, where like, okay, like your 3rd string quarterback is really your backup, and you'll just deal with the repercussions of having the more change of pace guy, unless you keep all 3 active, obviously. But
yeah,
that's my take on that. Moving on to Birmingham, couple surprise cuts there, man. I thought Bubba Bolden, that was a guy a lot of people were pretty high on. Slade Bolden, they advertise these guys, man, and and then they cut them. Like, we'll talk about it with Memphis a little bit. Colt Cabral, that might have been a numbers thing. Schneider's a guy who can play guard or center. Like, I think he's an all-league player, no matter what, to be honest with you. O'Shea Douglas has been there for 2 years. Myron Mitchell has been a reserve guy for them. Henri Saint-Amour, pretty good dude. And then Chauncey Rivers. But Birmingham, we always thought, had the plethora of talent. That linebacker room, very strong. Defensive linemen, really strong. This team is very strong all around. Their weakest part, and I use it loosely, might be their running back room. Might be. Like, I don't know what the weak link is on this team.
Yeah, we'll get to it when we're doing our predictions for week 1. Birmingham, for me, their only true weakness is the fact that they have a high turnover rate for their roster. They sent 17 guys to the NFL, 5 or 6 of them stuck. So the core of their team is going to be fundamentally different this year. And I think it's going to take maybe a few weeks to figure out who exactly is going to be those guys. But yeah, I mean, you look around, very few teams can lose Slate Bolden and Victor Bolden in the same week. And still, like, you look at the receiving core and like, it's pretty good. They're just stacked across the board. Cole Cabral to me was the biggest surprise, especially just because he was their starter last year. So they picked their backup center over their starting center, which is interesting. I like it just because of the fact that it shows that, like, it was a true competition this year. It wasn't just, okay, well, we have our guys that are definitely going to stick around when a guy like that gets cut. But yeah, I mean, looking across the board, edge rusher is kind of surprising too, where they only have 2 guys from the beginning of camp at that edge group. Taco Charlton and Jonathan Garvin were mid-camp additions, so it'll be interesting to see what they got there. But all in all, I mean, it's not surprising. This team's pretty stacked across the board.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty excited to see what they can do. And like you said, that turnover is pretty gnarly from the last 2 years. But you talk about the core and everything like that. Like you got Jamar Smith, 7th year in the offense. You got CJ Marable, 3rd year with the team. Ricky Pearson, year 2. Zuber, he's a pro at this point. 3rd year in spring ball. Deion Kane, 2nd year. Sternberger, 2nd year. Marcus Ball, 3 years. A couple of their offensive linemen, 2 or 3 years in the system. Tillman, 3 years. Scooby Wright, 3 years. DeMarcus Gates, 2 years plus all his other time. Lorenzo Burns, Kenny Robinson. Granted, it's been a minute. Like all these guys got experience. All these guys know the game. Air quote. The special teams group. 2 out of 3 years with the team. With Blewett going into his 2nd year, I mean, looking relatively healthy. Besides Willie Yarborough. It doesn't, nothing really surprises me with this group. I still think Jamar goes into week 1 as the guy, but quickly, on my opinion. But Jamar is fighting for his legacy, fighting for his career right now, so that might motivate as well. And is Marlon Williams on his 2nd year or 3rd year? I don't remember.
It's his 3rd year, but he barely played last year because he tore his Achilles or ACL. Or it was hurt, something where week 1, first play. So,
yeah, I think he was like in line for a big game too, and then he got hurt. Like he had like 3 receptions in the first quarter, first half, and then you're like, okay, let's see what's going on there. Especially because they had Osiris Mitchell, who they or not Osiris Mitchell, another guy. Going into the Battlehawks, a couple surprises here. First one is for me, Kevin Atkins, fan favorite. And believe it or not, my second one is Dallas Warmack. I mean, everything else kind of makes sense to me. I thought they might have kept Mitchell around, but who are you cutting? Jeff Thomas might have had to have done some good stuff there to keep him around as well. But, I mean, we talked about them cutting a defensive lineman. I think we both agreed on TJ Pesafea, and it obviously wasn't. They liked Tenton Salts because of his versatility. Abdul Beecham was a guy I thought was kind of close to not making it. But obviously his versatility and whatnot. I think really what it came down to for Warmack is they had Donovan West, who's younger, probably more athletic, and can play both guard and center. And then you have Warmack, who's kind of a little bit older, and they probably chose the younger. Beecham plays a little tackle. Magwood can play the guard spots. Yeah, everyone on that roster could pretty much play multiple positions. If you really needed to, you could put Mike P at defensive tackle if it really got short, and put Donovan West in there or any of these other guys. But I mean, outside of Kevin Atkins, and that became a numbers game, he beat out Kobe Smith. Not too surprised. Callahan O'Reilly must have done something, to get that spot.
Yeah.
Because that was a guy I was like, I'd love to see this dude make the roster as a rookie. I don't know if he was a draft pick or a UDFA. I think he was a draft pick.
He was he was the combine. So he was an XFL combine guy. So
yeah,
that's another guy there.
Yeah, that was a guy if they kept the roster, I think they were talking about going to like 55. Like, yeah, he makes the team, but that's a strong linebacker room, very versatile. They love Mike Rose. They think Mike Rose is going to be. They're saying Mike Rose had an injury in Miami and he would have made the team, but. Also at defensive back, a little bit surprised Lavert Hill made it. It was kind of, I know he was all XFL, but I felt like there were guys better. And I think we got some swan songs here, man. I think, this is the last season for Travis Feeney if he doesn't, produce at the level he's at. A couple of these guys, some swan songs. But we'll see what happens on that front. Jake Sutherland, the guy who's like 30 years old at this point. See what's up with him. They really like Jamarcus Bradley, but they also were very cognizant that he was going to be a little bit lower on the depth chart because of Shep and Butler and Jackson and Aitman, and they love Jerome Cap. So I'm very curious to see Cap's like involvement with a lot of this stuff as well. But nothing too crazy for the Battlehawks, in my opinion.
Yeah, just a few other points. You're talking about veteran guys, that secondary, Drayvon Askew, Henry, Cameron Kelly, Channing Stribling. These guys have been around forever in these sort of leagues. So, that's some veteran depth. But in general, St. Louis to me might be the least interesting team, not because they're bad, but just because it feels like it's the same core from last year for the most part. There's some, running backs one that's going to look different, defensive line, but like as far as like teams that I just don't know what to expect, I know exactly what St. Louis is and isn't going into the year pretty much. And, any surprises would be breakout candidates, not guys that, because like for the most part, it's just guys who, like you look at their linebacker crew, their starting 3 guys are back. So it's like, okay, it's going to be the same pretty much across the board.
Yeah, I mean, the only real breakout candidate to probably who someone a little bit more casual is going to be Marcel Aitman, and that was because he got hurt last year, and Butler really took on a lot of his workload. So, I mean, for wide receivers across this league, the biggest breakout candidate I have is Gary Jennings, to be honest with you. And that's because he was buried under that roster in St. Louis and now kind of moves up a couple spots in Birmingham. But we'll see what happens with that. I mean, they got some guys. Deion Kane's going to be a little bit more involved in their passing attack and whatnot. So, I mean, you assume so. So, I mean, nothing too crazy on that. Yeah. Moving down to San Antonio, I mean, Calvin Turner was really the only guy that I was like, oh, man, that sucks.
Yeah. Now, the one weird thing about San Antonio is they still have 52 players at the moment. So I don't know. There might be some guys that got placed on IR that we don't know about. But right now that's one thing I'll just point out. Everyone else is at 50. So that keep in mind, there might be a guy or two that we talk about that actually isn't going to play because they got cut and they didn't talk about it or whatever. But yeah, I mean, to me, San Antonio is like the opposite of St. Louis, where I have no idea what to expect with this team, but in a fun way where they have a lot of pieces that if it comes together, it could be really fun. That receiving core is really interesting. Guys like Marquez Stevenson, Matt Lanters making their debut. Anthony McFarland, I kind of keep mentioning it, is a guy who I view very highly and I think could be a star in this league potentially. If they use him in the correct way. And, he is what I think he will be. Defensively, it's a little bit less interesting just because it's a lot of returning guys, not necessarily to the Brahmas, but just in spring football in general, guys like Savion Patton, Delonte Scott, Tim Ward, Devontae Beckett, Jordan Williams. But all in all, they did a pretty good job of getting new faces. And their offensive line is going to look very different than, either the Brahmas or the Roughnecks looked last year. There's new faces, some secondary. There's going to be some new faces. So all in all, this is one of the more interesting teams. The teams I'm excited to see week 1 because I don't know what to expect.
Yeah, like how this Quinn Dormady do an AJ Smith system. Cody Latimer, can he repeat? And that's a good story to follow because I think if Cody Latimer has another good year, like someone's going to take a flyer on him despite his age. Landon Akers, could he get himself back into the league? Can Jontre Kirkland, stay healthy the whole year? Running back room, I think you got 3 good backs down there. I do agree that Bryson Aline, because of his versatility, is going to be that first guy off the bench, in my opinion. And then John Lovett is a guy who had some success last year. Pretty good career at Penn State. And was he at USC as well, I feel like?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
I know he was at
Penn State.
I know he transferred. I don't remember if he was with USC or then went to Penn State, but I know he's a 2-school guy. Those are 2 dudes that I'm really excited to see what's going on in their running back room with McFarland and the lean. And, you know, it kind of sucks, man, because, you know, Lovett's not a bad guy, but, you know, maybe he needs one more year to kind of push forward on that. Going to Michigan, I think Michigan had one of the more notable, like, wow, they're really cutting this guy type thing was Gerard Fernandez.
Yeah.
I knew they really liked Noah Dawkins, and I know they like Ginda. So it really, to me, speaks volumes of what Deshaun White is doing more than anything else, because that was a draft pick of theirs, late pick, and then pushed into, you know, to action, replaced Santrell Latham, who was another draft pick of theirs. I think they made pretty well on the draft for them to have these guys able to go and whatnot. But I know they just released Drew Himmelman, who I was very high on, but obviously not high enough on, you know, Ryan Pope and Josh Dunlap did a pretty good job of obviously securing their spots. They got NAIA product from Benedictine, Jim Okafor. He's over there as well. Receiving core looks pretty good. You know, no one that like blows my mind or anything like that. But, you know, Devin Gray, pretty underrated. Marcus Sims took some strides last year. Running back room, I like a lot. And then, you know, EJ Perry or Danny Etling, pretty athletic guys. I could see making some plays with their legs. Tight end group, let's see. A lot of people were very high up on Gunnar Oaks last year, so I'm very curious to see if he can kind of, you know, leapfrog Cole Hicatini, who was dominant in the slot and in the red zone at times. Defense, interior, pretty strong. You know, I think Breland Speaks, you know, let's see what he can do with Kenny Wilkes on the other side of him, because he had his big game week 1, tailed off, and then really wasn't the same guy until Levi Bell came. And then you saw Levi Bell make some plays, and then Speaks ended up getting more one-on-ones. That's a guy I'm very curious to see how they can have that symbiotic relationship and really both of them benefit, because it was a different defense once they got Levi Bell there. And I think not enough people talked about that.
Yeah, looking around the roster, I think the one that stands out to me again, draft eligible guy, DeGabriel Floyd, him beating out Gerard Fernandez is, you know, interesting. You know, that's a guy who I wouldn't have bet on him getting cut at all, and the fact that he made it over Fernandez is something I'm, you know, keeping an eye on. Wilkes, I fully agree on. That's one I'm keeping an eye on. The defensive line, those top two guys, and Wise and Carter, is certainly some that I'm going to keep an eye on. But with this Panther team, there's a reason why I have them kind of low, and there'll be some talk about this when we talk about predictions. But that receiving core, I'm not sold on at all. And honestly, I'm kind of the one I'm most interested in is Hightower, just because he's new. We kind of know what the other 5 are, unless someone steps up. These are all guys who have been receiver 2s or 3s in the USFL, and the level is higher now. So I just really am not high on that group, and their weapons in general. I'm just not. There's just nothing other than like Nate McCrary, who I personally watched play for the Ravens in the preseason pretty well like 2 years ago. So he's a guy I'm keeping a hard eye on. But other than that, like, it's just a lot of like, well, I know this guy's not going to suck, but like, there's a lack of upside at those groups for sure.
Yeah, you look a guy like Trey Quinn, you're like, he's going to put up, 40 receptions, 500 yards again. But you're like, is that really what you want from your number one? Like I view Trey Quinn as the number. I know you have him in the slot, but I view him as their number one receiver on this team.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, like Jordan
who
Sewell.
Else would it be?
Yeah, I mean Devin Gray, but he's he doesn't stretch the field like Quinn does. I mean Devin Ross, more of a legacy pick at this point. Friends.
That was another one that I was really surprised.
Yeah, I mean. Up by San Antonio last year, played with Michigan for a couple games, made it to the practice
Was
squad of the
depth.
Raiders for 5 minutes and then, came back.
Yeah, that was
He's,
like
you
2
know, he's a
days.
little bit older too. You're kind of like, good for him, right? Biggest disappointment on
Yeah.
this team, Jared Horst. I'm gonna be honest with you. See if he
We'll
makes
see
his
about
way.
him and Okafor.
Yeah,
because they were both rookies, and right
yeah.
now it seems like Pope and Dunlap are going to be your starters. At least that's what they've what we've seen on social media. Maybe Horst made a late push, but if he can't beat out Ryan Pope, I'm a little disappointed. Not that Pope's awful, but he's a guy that clearly teams view as replaceable. This is his I think 4th team in the last 12 months or something ridiculous, maybe 13 months. He's just been all over the place. So,
Yeah.
we'll see. Maybe he took a step up, but it's just not something to get terribly excited of. Yeah. So that's his 5th team in the last 13
Pope's
months.
making the tour right now. Well, the
For
final
sure.
team to look over is the Memphis Showboats. The biggest cut to here was DJ Daniel. DJ Daniel.
Yeah.
We talked about a little bit was Chance Little. They were really pumping him on social media. Cam Sutton, I thought was, a little bit more athletic than JJ Wilson, but I think we talked about that. Like JJ was a guy, seems more of a blocker. You can put in the backfield. I know they had him at fullback a couple times last year. Rashard Davis been with the team for years. Couldn't crack that roster. I do like their receiving core. I know they've been very high on Dawood Davis, Jonathan Adams, absolute stud. Lee Morris flashed a lot of potential last year. D. Anderson, same thing. You got D. Anderson as your wide receiver 4. That's not a bad place to be at, in my opinion.
Yeah, I saw a tweet this morning from Vontae Diggs where he was talking about offensive player of the year candidates from Memphis, and the fact that he included Davis in that group opened my eyes to they really view this guy highly. He was in a list of a couple names, but clearly they that kind of is a tell that he's going to be a starter there. So on this team, that's the guy I think I'm the most excited about. Overall, though, this is a team that in general is another one where it kind of is okay. They're built out of spring league vets. So if you followed the USFL or XFL the last couple of years, the vast majority of these names, they've been around. So, at first it made me, it felt like, oh, they're this all USFL team, basically. They built through the drafts, which made me put them kind of high up. But I've kind of cooled down on Memphis because I just don't know if the upside's there for them. Unless, again, like a few other teams I mentioned, some surprise guys come out of nowhere. But in general, I'm just looking at this roster and I'm like, they're probably not going to be terrible, but I think their ceiling is kind of capped on how good they can be in a league like this.
Yeah, the USFL runs through Birmingham until different. That's the biggest thing is it's
for sure.
We could talk about these other teams and really it just seems like who gets that second playoff spot, even if Birmingham regresses to where they're 6-4, they're still going to make the playoffs. And then you just hope that you catch them on a bad day more than anything else. Let's go straight into these predictions, man. I'll bring that tab up real quick. So made a nice little graphic here. A little bit difficult to get the colors unjacked, to be honest with you. I'm still learning how to do that. But, starting off the week strong, Birmingham Stallions versus Arlington Renegades, first game of the season. I go Birmingham. I couldn't think of any scores, to be honest with you, but I go Birmingham. I think they're just more solid all around, like we talked about. I do like Arlington a lot. I think Arlington is going to be better than what they were last year in the regular season. I know that's speaking out both sides of your mouth when they won a championship, but for Arlington, first real test. I feel like I'll be able to gauge the Arlington season even if they lose after this game.
Yeah, this one's a lot closer than I think a lot of people will have it. As far as betting goes, my hunch is that Birmingham's going to be a heavy favorite going into this game. And if either of these teams are heavy favorites, I think I'm going to take the underdog plus the points as far as betting goes. Because I think Arlington, even though they're not as talented, they're a team that has their core together more than Birmingham does. So I think Birmingham's going to kind of come a little slow out of the gate. We saw in the USFL last year, the teams like Memphis that had to completely reinvent themselves from year 1 to 2 were the ones that started off losing a bunch of games. And I think that, that might mean Birmingham's still talented. They're still going to be in this game, I think I'm going to take them still because that's a little too hot takey for me, but I'm just saying that Arlington is much closer to this, and this one's much more of a pick 'em to me than it is like obviously Birmingham's the better team.
Yeah, to me it's like a 20, like if Birmingham wins 28-24, 24-20,
yeah,
that like within that 4-point swing right there. It would not surprise me if we just looked up and it was 10-0 Arlington, because their script was on point. Maybe they do go with Matt Corral over Jamar, and Matt's just like, this is way faster than I thought it was, type thing. Like, and maybe they do a QB switch or something like that, like, or vice versa or something, since it's been a minute since Jamar's played in the game and whatnot. So I got Birmingham. I think it is going to be a lot closer. For the sake of the league, I hope it is a lot closer. But yeah, no, Birmingham starts off week 1 pretty strong with that. This one is a pretty easy pick for me. I could see a 28-10 Battlehawks victory. I think they're too fast. I think they are too fast for Michigan. I know I've been very high on Ginda's improvement in his pass defense, but you spread it out, and Jacob Sailors is a guy who I think could take a wheel route to the house. If you put him up against a linebacker, you kind of run levels, some clear out on one side of the field, and then you got Jacob Sailors running down the field and whatnot. That's a guy that I can expect to have an impact on this game from the receiving option as well. Physically, if they are able to, like, Chip speaks a lot and Wilkes isn't the guy that a lot of people think he is, and they did such a good job with their drag routes last year. They could not match, like, a lot of teams could not, like, appropriately pass Hakeem Butler off because of his speed and whatnot. And then you got Shep in the slot. I do think Adonis Alexander's good. I think Levante Taylor's good. I know he was very bend but don't break. But yeah, no, to me right now, it is a clear, like, 28-10, 31-10 game.
Yeah, I fully agree. St. Louis, they have a lot of their core is the same as last year, so I think they're going to get off to a hot start, and they're the more talented team. If there's a game that's going to be a blowout week 1, I think this is the one that's the most likely to be, because to me it's just there's a talent difference and there's also a continuity difference. I hope Michigan can make it a better game, and maybe EJ Perry, if we see second half playoff EJ Perry, maybe he's able to make it a little bit closer than we're saying. But yeah, no, I'm taking the Battlehawks all the way for this one for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there could be like some cheap touchdowns where you're like, oh, see, they lost 30-20, and you're like, did they though? Did they lose by 10? Mm-hmm. This one pretty clearly defined to me as well. It's a little bit closer though. It's a little closer to me. And if San Antonio plays to their potential, this is going to tell a lot of the season. Now, after Abram Smith got hurt, I felt that DC went from an 8-2 to 8-2, 7-3 to a 6-4 team. And that's a lot of stock in that guy. But I think Abram Smith in that offensive front, and he powered over people on that second level and took a lot of pressure off Teamu, who last year and the year before in the USFL, it took him a minute to figure it out. So San Antonio could sneak a win here. I still think that DC wins 20-17.
Yeah, I agree with who you're picking, but I disagree with the outcome. I think this game is another one that could get to blowout potential for DC. Yes, they have some things to figure out at running back and receiver. I fully acknowledge that. But they're actually the team that has the highest amount of players from year one going into year two. They had like 28. And they also, last year, we saw how they played against this run and shoot air raid system. It was the teams that they did the best against: Seattle, Houston. Greg Williams kind of has the number there against this scheme. He kind of put Brandon Silvers in hell last year when they came to DC. So I think this is a game that kind of reminds me of as an NFL comparison. Last year the Ravens played the Texans week 1, and I think this is similar where San Antonio, I think, will be a good team. I think they're going to be a middle of the road team. They can win games down the stretch, I think, once they figure it out. But they're not going to figure it out week 1. It's going to take them a few weeks to find their true identity. And I think DC's just too ahead of the curve. I'm in DC, and I think it's going to be a few touchdown game.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. That's that early Sunday game. Going into the final game of the week, I would argue that this might be the air quote best game of the week in a weird way, because I think talent wise, there's not much difference, if that makes sense. Even though I think Memphis is the better team, like you said, it's going to take them a minute to figure it out. So we could see some of these defensive players on the Roughnecks start eating a little bit. Man, I go to quarterback play on this, and I think that Case Cookus is going to lead the Showboats in a 24-18 victory. What do you think?
I think my comparison for this game would be the Breakers Maulers week 1 game last year, where the defenses were just ahead of the offenses for the most part, and both offenses kind of struggled out of the gate more than you expected them to. I think it's going to be a low scoring game. I'm going to pick Memphis, but I'm really cooling off on Memphis. I had them at 3 going into camp, and now I think I have them at 5 or 6 in the league. And that being said, though, Houston has been at 8 the whole time. I need to see it from Houston first. If they win this game, though, I think it'll be very interesting going forward, seeing what Houston can be, because they do have some potential. They're not like this, they're not like Orlando last year, where they were bottom of the barrel and you knew they were going to be bottom of the barrel the whole season.
The FCS,
they have potential. Every team in this league has potential.
Yeah. When the FCF team that played in the XFL, that was entertaining. Yeah.
So
I mean,
so I'm gonna pick Memphis, but it could be a little bit closer than I think a lot of people will have going into week 1.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to put so much value on one position because it is a team sport, but I don't know anything about Jarrett Guarantano outside of the preseason film and some of his workouts and whatnot and his college film. I know that Case Cookus is going to grit his way to first downs and touchdowns, or at least into field goal range. And when you got a guy like Matt Conklin, you're probably feeling pretty confident within 40 yards, 45 yards and whatnot. I like the grit factor of it on that sense. offensive line, to me, they're talking about being way more athletic there than they were last year in New Orleans. Very curious to see what they got going on that front. How much they're going to lean on Darius Victor or just their running game in general with all, with their weapons at wide receiver. But it is a little bit similar to Philadelphia last year, where they had Corey Coleman, and granted a lot of injuries and whatnot, but a lot of solid pieces at wide receiver. But Cookus at times looked completely destroyed behind that offensive line. But he also was able to lead the team in rushing in 3 games just based off scrambles and whatnot. So I'm very curious to see. I feel like half the league is unknown. Half the league, we feel like we know what we're talking about as far as St. Louis is probably going to be 7-3, 8-2. DC probably going to be 7-3, 8-2. Or, I don't think they win 9 games. I think they split with St. Louis. San Antonio probably going to be 4-6, 5-5. Memphis, or excuse me, in the USFL conference, it's who's going to be that 6-4 team in the for that second spot. I know we talked about earlier with Birmingham. I did say they could be 6-4. I don't think they are, but it's, to me, I think everyone's pretty confident that it will be a 6-4 team, or excuse me, Birmingham will be a playoff team regardless of their record. So who's gonna figure it out? When is EJ Perry gonna figure it out? Will he have the opportunity to figure it out, or do they go straight with Denny Etling? So those are a lot of things to me that I am very curious on as well. Moving forward, any you want to add on any of that stuff? I feel like we covered a pretty decent amount of information in just under an hour. I feel pretty good about my picks. I feel pretty good about the analysis of everything. What else are you thinking before we go into week 1?
I'm just excited. We're here. Yeah. There's a lot of players that I'm really excited to see. Teams like Birmingham, teams like San Antonio. They're teams that I've been intrigued with seeing for a few months now, and now we know, okay, a couple more days and we'll be there. So I'm just really excited. This is going to be interesting one way or another, and hopefully we kind of see some positive momentum early in the league year, and not just with players, but also, league wide too, for sure.
Yeah. And something I wanted to put, and I should have put it in the beginning of the show, but I'm going to address it to you. First off, thank you everyone for tuning in and whatnot, especially with the technical difficulty earlier. Second thing I want to point in there is how many players get a USFL or NFL opportunity after this year? What's your over-under?
Ooh, that's something interesting off the top of my head. I'm going to put the over-under at 63.
Okay.
I think it's going to be around what the XFL did. Maybe a little bit higher, maybe 67 or 68, but in that range where, there's not as many players getting opportunities. So I don't think we're going to touch the 111 we got last year. But it's going to be hefty. I think we're going to get a good amount of signings, but I just don't think we're going to get to that number.
Yeah. We'll see what happens. I think the number is 73. I like 73 for some reason. I go at 73 as my high water mark. I'll ask this question again next week if we go live or if we do a pre-recording for our week 1 review / week 2 preview and whatnot. Other than that, Nick, thank you for coming on. Thank you for working with me. Appreciate everyone tuning in. I know we kind of jacked that up and whatnot. That was 100% my fault. But yeah, let's do it, man. Week 1, finally here, 2024. I think we got the first of 3 years to figure this out, man. I think this is the year 1. I think we resetted, to be honest with you. I hope we did.
I hope you're right.
Yeah. But thank you guys
for
tuning
3 years
in.
To figure it out,
man. Yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in. Leave in the comments how many people you think are going to make it to the from the UFL to the NFL. Like I said, I got 73. Nick's got around that 60, high 60 mark and whatnot. Make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week. Thank you, guys.